I would say the sound quality is quite good. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
My turn today to be hungover. Don't worry.
May I suggest to you a refreshing Le Croix?
You know very well that they don't have Le Croix in Ukraine. However the fuck you say it in French. It's a American language.
That's your problem.
It is my problem.
So you're hungover this time. We have swapped roles.
I know. No, I'm hungover now. But I definitely was this much more extensively this morning.
Wait, I'm missing
But
a... There we go. Now I appear as though I am a wizard.
Of what?
I'll fucking tell you. Wait. There we go. This is my wizard stuff.
What the fuck is that?
It itches my brain because what we're talking about today makes it scratch.
What is
It's
Miles the Gray?
Miles the Gray?
Backscratcher that retracts like this, and you can use it as an extra hand with like this, and then really scare your dogs with it when they come in the room and you do. I hurt my face with this. I shouldn't do that. Oh, we're not going to include our faces in this recording. Okay. Did you have a thing? The slide deck. Did you just post the slide deck in the thing?
Yes.
There it is. Funny image. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Cool. So we could really just go through and like delete a lot of this shit and or copy a lot of this shit over and share what where your deck's at. Show me your deck.
I think I can simply do one of these.
Show me your deck.
Worked. All right.
2 hours later.
So, welcome to Kinda podcast about Ukraine and all things Eastern European affairs. My name is Ben. I'm the voice that you're listening to right now. Yay, Miles.
Hello, wizard.
We're gonna have to take like a screenshot of your face right now and put it in the final edit.
I'm just gonna have it like slowly blow up.
Yeah.
And then eyes and camera. There's a reason why I'm acting a little crazy because I'm gonna be a little frustrated. We'll get there. Artem.
Yes. Hey guys, so I'm Artem. I'm Ukrainian who lives in Canada.
And therefore the most legitimate of us all.
Have you embraced maple culture?
Nah. No, like that culture of the French Canada. We don't do it here.
Maple syrup is a French thing?
Well, it's like the thing from Quebec.
Yes, le syrup maple.
I learn something new every time I ask about Canada. What about Vermont? Because they're like maple. Michigan's all mapley. Are you saying this is a French proxy? I'm sorry, this is so stupid. Continue.
Actually, we don't know that.
Just walked a mile to take like 2 steps, but I appreciated you.
We don't know. What?
Yet.
Oh, yet. Love your calm, level-minded response. All right, what are we looking at?
Yeah, you chose Vatnik of the week, so go. Let's hear
So
it.
we're looking at this time nominee of Vatnik of the week, who is Marjorie Taylor Greene, and she's been nominated for the second time already, and I preferred only over the Sarah Palin, only because Sarah Palin was generally speaking very pro-Russian like agenda, which is weird. But the MTG spoke like about Ukraine, so just the matter of relevancy.
Putin might have floated spores across the Bering Strait. Sarah Palin is right up there. She's she got like the magnetism or something.
So what did MTG do recently that required her to be or nominated her again for Vatnik of the week, of the month, of the year?
A dubious title.
She just expressed what he's about to like. What she expressed what was like important, not important, like for the purpose of blocking off the aid for Ukraine.
So she's basically spouting off Kremlin talking points, Kremlin propaganda, would you say?
No, I wouldn't say so.
Okay, I thought that'd be a good transition. I'll have to cut that out later.
No. I still think it's the domestic American agenda, but still it is directed, pointed to Ukraine.
Do you say thematic American agenda?
I think domestic, yeah, is something
domestic
about domestic. So it's about the Congress. So it's not about Ukraine, but Ukraine is a good reason to say yes.
What I really want to know is how Sarah Palin went from being John McCain's running mate, who I feel like John McCain was a pretty reasonable human being, to posting a picture of Putin and saying that Putin is not fake news. Like, how do you fall so far? I just
Well,
don't.
the Republicans from other dimension, I'd say. No, okay.
She's like an old guard Republican, though. That's the thing that I don't get.
Yeah, and John McCain is historically known for his allyship with Ukraine. Like, he would not support any of the talking points at all. He was very important for Ukraine, their sovereignty and stuff like that. That's a whole other episode, actually. John McCain.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on this one?
No. Yeah.
Truly impressive that the plastic surgeons that are responsible for the Frankenstein before us have done so much good work that they've managed to make Marjorie Taylor Greene Vatnik of the Week twice in 3 episodes. That's a truly impressive level of commitment, but maybe they're just being paid really well because you know who didn't pay for school? Marjorie Taylor Greene, because she didn't have to pay her school loans because she got them forgiven.
But did she really? That's another just
She got like 6-digit, like over 100K worth forgiven, and she's running around saying that people can't. That's the ultimate. One of the other ironies of the MAGA, she had like 120,000, I think, or something like that. That was completely just written off because of like a.
Is that PPP loans or was that actually student loan?
It was educational loans to her name. So the fact that she was going around and screaming that people that have been working on loans for 20 years can't get a break, is rich. I've been paying my loans off since college. I would not mind for that to not exist for other people. They're predatory, but that's a whole different conversation.
But I appreciate it being brought up because, well, it's a topic that needs to continually be brought up until change occurs.
Yeah, well, change is a coming.
Moving on.
Yeah,
right.
let's
Gentlemen,
take the lead.
what do you see here?
Olive Garden.
Does Olive Garden have those kind of tomatoes?
I don't actually know what. There's no breadsticks. I retract my statement.
Is that just a giant vat of oil right there?
Seems like olive oil and a very weird fork.
Yeah,
That is
you're right. That
on the
actually is
picture.
an uncanny looking fork. Is this some kind of like Italian pasta fork that I'm too uncultured to know about?
I think this is an AI generated photo, and Elena Leia is just like a program. No human.
I like it.
If no human would ever make a flat fork. That's just.
Or drink an entire gravy boat of olive oil. Anyway, there's a reason I have this here. And so what do you think of when you think of the word spaghetti in front of the word defense?
Incompetence. Something that an incompetent person would do.
What is that?
Not a good defense.
Not a good defense, a spaghetti defense. And so a lot of the Kremlin talking pieces, a lot of the things that you hear out of politicians who are in trouble for some reason, lawyers who are defending people who are clearly in the wrong, sometimes will use something called the spaghetti defense. And so basically it's throwing a plate of spaghetti at the wall and hoping some of it sticks. And that's kind of what happens when we think about Kremlin talking pieces, propaganda that are parroted online. And some of them are nonsensical, but they apparently stuck because people are still using those talking points. People are still like having the spaghetti stuck to them and they think it's really good pasta and they just keep slurping it up along the anyway, I'm going to get really graphic now. There. So go for
Can
it.
I have to say your analogy is fantastic because this is like, if we're following the metaphor just to its logical end, this is people that are approaching the spaghetti that is stuck to the wall and just like sucking their faces off the wall, just sucking off the wall like a leaf.
They don't really think too much more about it. And so, Kremlin propaganda, spaghetti defense. There's a specific thing that I have seen recently on the internet that makes me kind of go a little crazy because it's just so low effort, low effort. And so I want to give you some examples of what I've been seeing. And this is a kind of like bring out the topic of the episode. So what we have here are some screenshots. And so I'm going to call on Ben. Can you just read the first one?
All right. I'm going to put on my asshole hat. It is, in fact, a proxy war. All that is required to meet the definition of a proxy war is that Ukraine be receiving funding, military training, arms, or other forms of material assistance, close single quote, on a long-term basis. So,
Yes. And okay, next one. Russia invaded historically Russian territory. Anything else is NATO propaganda.
0 points.
0 points. All right, Artem, what's this next one?
Of himself.
So the next one is, it's also a proxy war. America, NATO, China, Iran, and North Korea are gaining real-time knowledge about the capabilities their weapons, vehicles, and gear possesses. The Ukraine war highlights new ways to warfare NATO would use in future war.
I want to read
Mass
that
use of
again.
drones, cyber warfare, etc. Meanwhile, two superpowers are pulling and all the strings USA and China.
Oh, so they're saying it's the USA and China that are having a proxy war, I guess. Is that what this is saying?
This guy needs to stop playing Metal Gear Solid.
Oh,
Yeah,
Metal
almost. Okay,
Gear.
but like two superpowers. Sure, that's what you want to have with your biggest
Look at
trade
this
partner.
sentence again. The Ukraine war highlights new ways of warfare NATO would use in a future war. I guess the grammar's not that bad. Maybe I'm just dyslexic.
Why do you need a new one? You have a nuclear,
know,
like it's nuclear or like missiles.
Ukraine does not have a NATO arsenal. Ukraine has like a binder twine and band-aid version of a NATO arsenal. This is not. That's a completely invalid argument, but
And this-
massive use. But this guy can't NATO, so I'm already and he's a dog. So
Upset Dog 7952. This comment is in response to my comment asking what makes you think that this is a proxy war. User Upset Dog 7952 also was a brand new account, and the first thing that account did was respond to my comment. And so I said, "Are you a Russian bot?" And then he says, "I am not a Russian bot." And then I say, "I think that's something a Russian bot would say." And he deleted the comment.
classic.
Anyway, moving on.
You Spider-Man meme that guy out of Reddit.
Just like, damn, dude. But here's the thing. He deleted that comment, but he just kept going, spouting the same thing over and over again. And then we were brigaded. All of his comments were upvoted so many times, and all of my comments downvoted so many times. And someone pointed it out the next day because I had not really realized it. I wasn't really that invested, didn't really care at the time. But this was on a very small subreddit where there's probably 5 people active reading this at any point in time from beginning to end. And so to have 26 upvotes after 11 hours in a very small corner of the internet, I suppose is not impossible. I would just say pretty improbable. Anyway, moving on. Whose turn is it to read this next one?
40. Oh boy. I don't know whose turn it is.
I'll just go. It's fine. This is Southern Relative 75, who also, I think, is Upset Dog 7952, because both of them have the same kind of thing going on in their title. Both of them have only had accounts either 1 day old or since, I think it was December of last year. I think they just decided to hark on their own talking points by pretending to be somebody completely new. Again, I spend way too much time on Reddit thinking about these things that will eventually give me cancer and let me have an early death. Huzzah. Next comment. I feel a lot of people are forgetting this is a proxy war. American vehicles are being tested against Russia's. This is all a test for the US, NATO to see how equipped they are to handle it. The US has Generation 5 and 6 tanks ready. They just haven't unveiled them yet. It's just a matter of time till we get what we have gets expended. It's just a matter of time till what we have gets expended to bring out the new generation of weapons. Now, you see how those kind of are basically the exact same comments, the top one and the bottom one right there?
Yeah, I just wanted to say it.
Yeah.
They do a general statement first, and then the last the last sentence or the last two is just a projection into action of someone, like of some side of the conflict or war or the object, the subject.
Yeah, so it's like the IRA, the Internet Research Agency, is in full force currently. It's so much, in fact, that anyone can just come
Uh,
across it in real time.
if we need to understand that if the US were to ever, if they're just, let's just maybe take a moment, Miles, if you don't mind me hijacking your slide for 60 seconds, do a
Do
thought
it.
experiment of, oh boy,
But and you're
thought
drunk.
experiment of,
You're a cartoon drunk. How dare you?
I am cartoon drunk. Uh, Unfortunately, that was only relevant about 18 hours ago. But anyway, if the US were ever to unleash the full force of its military upon, this conflict, like just roll out everything that we have, this war would be over extremely quickly. Like America has a very set way that it fights wars. It's not been in this kind of ground, you know, trench kind of conflict, but America is very straightforward with how it. I mean, if you look at how we invaded Iraq and things like that, you go in, you blow up all the anti-air, you quickly establish air superiority, which we would absolutely do, because the F-22 exists, the F-35 exists, and everything else. And then if we would just walk tanks over back all the way, to the old Ukrainian border, and it would be over. There was no reason that the United States needs to use, that the primary motivation for the United States in this conflict is like to expend its old weaponry. Like what? You can sell that shit. Like when you're giving it away. Like,
Well, this is not the cheapest way to maintain a war. So if states were really about to like engage somehow, it could have been way cheaper to engage without any like help that needs to go through the parliament. It's just
Yeah.
cheaper. Why to have a proxy if you can done it like in a week? Just 1 week, no more.
yeah, just extra steps.
Perfect Editor 5008 said it's being called a proxy war because of how much support and equipment America has given Ukraine. America has been training Ukraine, giving them weapons and equipment. In a way, it's kind of like America is fighting Russia through Ukraine. It's that simple. Is it that simple though? Really? What is it to gain by calling this a proxy war using that specific definition? And so that made me kind of go down a little bit of a rabbit hole looking for the actual definition of what a proxy war is. And I found a few interesting things. The first thing I found was from Brittanica. Proxy war, a military conflict in which one or more third parties directly or indirectly support one another, one or more state or non-state combatants. That's an important distinction, state or non-state combatants, in an effort to influence the conflict's outcome and thereby to advance their own strategic interests or to undermine those of their opponent. Cool. Okay. Continuing on, third parties in a proxy war do not participate in the actual fighting. Yes, that I agree with, to any significant extent, if at all. Proxy wars enable major powers to avoid direct confrontation with each other as they compete for influence and resources. Direct means of support by third parties. What?
This definition's garbage because there's no way to differentiate this between proxy war from literally any other conflict in the history of our entire species.
Well, with this definition, yeah, every war, if somebody has an ally that gives them support, then it's a proxy war. And it's really easy to say like, oh yeah, people who are giving them support or aid or equipment or training, clearly they want to use the people who are actually fighting and dying as a means to their own end. Now, is that completely out of the realm of possibility with most conflicts? No, but at the same time, we're talking an actual definition of what a real proxy war is. And there's a few things that this definition doesn't actually say. Now, the other thing I want to look at is how on the Britannica webpage, they have a picture of a Ukrainian soldier in a trench facing Russian forces during the Russia-Ukraine war. But they don't it's just there as like a placeholder. And nowhere during my time reading this page did it say, other than following the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the United States and its NATO allies acted as third-party supporters of Ukraine, supplying that country with significant military assistance and imposing economic sanctions on Russia, while China and Iran acted as third-party supporters of Russia. But that isn't any, like, as you said, it's no different than any other conflict. There's going to be allies, there's going to be support. I don't like it.
Yeah, I don't either.
It just seems kind of lazy. And we're going to kind of look at the next thing to kind of, show you why. So it's too broad of a definition. That's kind of what I've come to. On the surface, with that definition, sure, it's a proxy war. Then I wrote out the point that we already said. So I'm just going to go on. So Wikipedia, I'm like, okay, what's a broad suppository informational outlet and where I could find out what a proxy war is based on a bunch of different sources? And so I went to Wikipedia, of course, and they said pretty much the exact same thing. And it's repeated here, non-state clients. I feel like that's a big part that's going to come up, and I'm going to talk about a little bit more as we go on. But have a proxy, the relationship usually takes a form of funding, military training, the same thing that we've been seeing. Boom. And then I found.
Can we go back very
Yes.
quickly?
Yes.
There's a very important distinction that's being made here in the first line where it says, in which at least one party is a non-state actor, which is supported by an external power.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So that is the key, I think, differentiation between that garbage Brittanica definition, which is just if two people fight and those people have friends, it's now a proxy war. Like what?
Yeah.
Whereas this is going to tie. I'm just going to put a pin in this and come back to it later because this is one of the main ways that Russia actually expands its geopolitical influence by annexing non-Russian territory.
Yep. I agree. Yes, that is an important distinction. Thank you for pointing that out. And then I found the actual definition that I'm going to be using for the rest of this episode to talk about what an actual proxy war is. And this comes from an article from I believe it's the King's College of London. They did an article about this entire topic, people labeling the Ukraine and Russia war as a proxy war. And they are coming out and saying, you got to stop doing that because it's just wrong. And they are using these two researchers, Rundia and David Sturman's definition of proxy war. The direct or indirect sponsorship of third-party, conventional or irregular forces that lie outside of the constitutional order of states engaged in armed conflict. The strategic objectives of sponsors involve a combination of coercion, disruption, or transformation, engineering a fundamental political transition in a target state. The Ukrainian armed forces are not a third party or irregular force that lies outside of the constitutional order of states engaged in armed conflict. That's the first thing I would like to point out as we kind of go through these definitions. Moving on from there. We're almost there. The invalid labeling of the war as a proxy. First big thing that came out in this article is like there are frictions between Ukraine and its allies over Ukraine's request for arms. The frictions have existed for a while. It took a very long time to get them what they need to be able to defend themselves. Western backing would be of little use if the Ukrainians were not ready to fight. And I love this next part. The willingness of Ukraine's armed forces, which is a state party, and civilian population to resist Russia is an indigenous response. And I feel like the word indigenous in this is really important because I feel like it's one of the only things that we've seen in these arguments, the screenshots that we've had from Reddit, the things that we have been looking at with Brittanica and Wikipedia is that this actually is humanizing the people who are in this conflict. It's an indigenous response to protect themselves and their borders, and it patronizes them to imply otherwise. This is the first thing I've seen that actually brings the camera focus on the actual Ukrainian people who are there every day fighting and dying and trying to keep the country the way it is.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody needs to remember that when the Euromaidan was actually happening back in 2013, 2014.
Okay, the second one.
Second one, yeah. The one that Americans know about. Unfortunately, only one or two. There is only one Ukrainian state, right? There is, it is a single homogeneous sovereign territory that Russia then injected a false proxy narrative into in order to legitimize its annexation of Ukrainian territory. So the indigenous response, Miles, is I think a really very, I don't want to say poetic, but it's extremely concise, but also it encapsulates a lot.
Yeah.
There is only one state actor in play here on the defensive side, and that is Ukraine. There's no American boots on the ground. There's no German boots on the ground. There's no any other European or otherwise Five Eyes or anything like that boots on the ground. It is a single Ukrainian indigenous response to a hostile invasion on its own territory.
Yeah. And the boots on the ground that would be considered part of a different nation, they are volunteers and they are open about them volunteering. Yeah, that's an important distinction also.
Yeah, and they're also a very, 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 very small percentage of the legal fighting. So this is not a.
I'd actually be interested to read up on that now, what it used to look like in the beginning and what it looks like now. That's a whole other thing. We've talked about that, I think, in the past. Anyway, so the third thing, Ukraine is a sovereign and independent state, as you just kind of said right there. While there's a genuine academic debate to be had about the implications of aid to Kiev, says the article, claims the Western powers are fighting to the last Ukrainian. It's insulting to the nation to call it a proxy. Now, you actually said something that was good, is that this idea of inserting a proxy on the side of Russia, going way back in the day, I think is one of the more frustrating things about this piece of misinformation, disinformation that I keep reading, is that oh yes, okay, so the Kremlin wants this. They like this. They like when people parrot this idea because it leans into a few different things. First of all, actually, I'm not going to use that as my first of all. Labeling Ukraine as a proxy for NATO or the United States takes away their autonomy and implies that Ukraine is not a legitimate country, which is a huge talking piece that's been used for years and years and years, taking away the sovereignty of Ukrainian citizens who did in fact vote to have an independent, sovereign Ukraine. They love that, especially if there's a Russian defeat. When there's a Russian defeat, it's so much easier for Russia to then say, it's so much easier for the Kremlin to then say, well, of course we lost. We were fighting the US, all of NATO, and Ukraine. We didn't just lose to Ukraine.
So this is also, this classic Russian playbook as it gets, to your point, Miles, that even if you watch, there's no way that America's going to have access to this because it's only, well, you'll have access to it, but you want to understand it. But legitimate Russian news reports and military bloggers and military channels that are saying things like, we destroyed 10,000 Navy SEALs and shot down 7 F-16s and blew up, 100 Abrams tanks. This is an active propaganda tool. This is not a theoretical thing. This is something that the Kremlin is currently and has been feeding to its people, that, the US and NATO are in Ukraine, and that's not a new point. This is a thing that exists and has existed for a long time. So maybe we should, R10, just like note for later, we should find a good like meme version of that and stick it on like top of the slide here and zoom it in and translate it with like lines and bubbles.
Yeah,
and things.
that's a good idea. I think it's good. Very. Anything else?
No, sorry.
No, don't be sorry. It's what we're here for. Okay, let me go to the next one. So, out of those definitions, I made a little bit of an inventory that it's smooth. I don't think it's perfect. I think it could probably be changed to better fit an actual definition of proxy war. But based on the 3 sources that I'm using, this is what I have come to. So, is it a proxy war? Inventory. Step 1. Objective 1. What the fuck would you call this? First set of criteria. What 1? Involvement of external powers. There we go. Or one or more external powers, states or non-state actors, supporting belligerents involved in the conflict. Do you know what belligerents means in this context?
Warring party.
Yeah, basically. People who are actually boots on the ground shooting shit up.
So
Moving, yes. Use of
What are
third. Go ahead.
Oh, I thought that was a question that was being posed.
Oh yeah, go for it if you want to expand.
I mean, this is involvement of external powers. The counter question here is like, this is a good list. I think this question is kind of more pointing towards support like direct military support in terms of like, oh, we're sending you an army or something like that, as opposed to we're sending you, like some money to help you pay for it. Because again, find me that wars aren't fought in vacuums, because diplomacy does not exist in a vacuum and geopolitics does not exist in a vacuum. So in terms of external powers directly contributing to this, like it's Ukraine defending itself, and they're the only ones that are actually doing the work. So would argue probably not. Artem, don't know if you want to weigh in on any of this at any, or maybe another point. Gosh, these hiccups are killer.
I believe it. Well, this is also like that first line is the argument that was posed by all of those Reddit comments, just that. And we still have 6 more to go through to actually be defined as proxy war. The next is use of third-party combatants. Third-party, state-sponsored and non-state actors directly involved in the conflicts proxies on behalf of external powers. Ukraine doesn't have 30 third-party combatants. They're not, that I know of, hiring mercenary groups like Russia did with Wagner, kind of, in a way. It's another kind of statement, I suppose. But after that, indirect conflict. Do the major powers involved avoid direct warfare against each other, instead using proxies to fight on their behalf? Oh, this is why strategic interest is supposed to be a separate line. I'm good at formatting. Do external powers supporting the proxies have strategic interests or objectives they seek to advance? Right. Long-term relationship. Is there a sustained and direct relationship between the external powers? Material support, kind of leaning into the top one as well, like giving military aid, training, arms funding. This next point, I think, is a very crucial one. Covert operations. Other instances of external powers engaging in covert operations or employing clandestine methods to support the proxies while maintaining plausible deniability. Clandestine methods. Are they doing things in secret? And when they get asked if they're doing things in secret, do they go, no, of course not. We're not even involved in this conflict. Plausible deniability.
May I ask something, guys? Because like I see all the like bullet points, and it comes to my mind that the like also not the least important part of it would be like the territory of the conflict. The territory of the conflict like impacts the exact definition of a proxy war. If you can imagine that a war starts, or in some parallel universe Ukraine invades Russia, that could have been a proxy war that the United States started against Russia.
Yeah. We're actually going to kind of touch on that here in a second. So as far as an inventory goes, involvement of external powers, state or non-state actors, are they supporting belligerents involved in the conflict? Belligerents being the people that are fighting on the ground. Moving on from there, use of third-party combatants, either state-sponsored or non-state actors,
So
who are directly involved in the conflict as proxies.
probably worth, can we point out the fact that volunteer battalions in their extremely small minority, I don't think a proxy war make?
Well, yeah, and we already touched on that a little bit. And it kind of goes onto the whole covert operations thing, because this is a big chunk of the definition of what defines a proxy war. Are there other parties or powers doing things or employing what's called clandestine methods, secret methods, to support the proxy? And do they try to maintain plausible deniability? And so is somebody, a power, secretly doing something, and then when they are asked about it, denying any and all involvement? That is the covert operations part of this.
Very overtly like acknowledging that Ukraine has Five Eyes intelligence. That's how they sunk the Moskva. That's how they did a lot of things. It's how they're using high bars to great effect, partially, I think. But no, there's no. That's a Russian move. That's we don't use that playbook here. We don't play that game.
Yes. So moving on from there, we already did this. I'm gonna move on and cut that out. So I just want to show this guy's face. Like, this dude's not part of a proxy government, which is another Kremlin talking piece. He's not being supported for the means of NATO or the US, other than, of course, just to defend the continent, I guess some people could say. But this man is simply fighting for his home and his sovereignty, which they do, in fact, have in Ukraine. This dude's not part of a third party belligerent group. He is part of the Ukrainian armed forces, an actual state that is under attack, who is defending themselves. This woman and this man here are an example of the turmoil that populations go through when they need to respond to defend their own home. Saying again that Ukraine is a proxy for NATO and the US is patronizing to them, because it is their home that they are fighting for. And not enough people who talk about these things online, not enough people who are making commentary in the news, acknowledge the actual people who are there losing their homes, their livelihoods, having their futures deleted simply because they want to live where they were born in their sovereign country. They are not a proxy. This man.
Just how can you just dehumanize somebody like that? It's still, you know what I mean? Like, if Russia rolled across the border and took, a third of the United States territory, just like, and then, Canada said, you people are Canadians, you've always been Canadians, you speak Canadian English, you just don't know it. Like, yeah, how would you even, just such a non-argument. That infuriating that it's so subtly dehumanizing, and yet
on the surface, like, it's not a big thing, but it when you actually look at what people are saying, whether they know it or not, they're saying Ukraine is not a nation.
Yeah, but you're very right to bring up the human side of it, because you can make the Ukraine fatigue and like inflation argument, but no. Even if you have Ukraine fatigue, or even if you're stretched thin because prices went up 17% or whatever the hell the problem is, there's still no excuse. Like, this argument does not have a leg to stand on that this is a proxy war in any kind of way. And I've not heard an actual compelling argument to that effect. Whereas, I can think of 100 good reasons, which is why we have this podcast, that you shouldn't dehumanize the people that are suffering right now by saying, oh, well, you're basically Russia anyway. So,
Mala Russia, little Russia, as some would say. Yeah. And the thing about Kremlin propaganda, in my view, is it is so powerful because they somehow hit a nerve inside of Americans specifically. And it's because Americans are hurting economically. They want somebody to blame, but they're not smart enough to really dissect the nuance of situations. And so the path of least resistance, what they think is going to make a change for them personally today, tomorrow, is, of course, stop giving all your money to Ukraine, when that in itself is not a true statement. So, of course, people are going to be parroting these things because it hits a nerve. And people are frustrated and tired. There is a minimalizing of the middle class that's happening right now. The wealth disparities that exist, and Russia loves it. The Kremlin loves it. And even in the past couple of days, the Kremlin's like, "Oh, those MAGA Trumpers are so stupid," basically coming out and saying that because they love chaos. The Kremlin's not on anyone's side in any other country. They will just manipulate and use and twist words to make chaos.
And to the credit, the thing that people underestimate is that I think it's a dangerous sort of pseudo fallacy where people see, even people that are just normal Americans or normal people in the West going about their daily lives, getting hit with the economic conditions and things like that, because we all know that the people at the top don't give a shit about the actual average American worker, but that's a whole different podcast. That the Russians, they see Russian tanks getting exploded, and they see all the cool things, because the Ukrainians have really good control over the infosphere, right? And they have had resounding successes given the scale of the task that was, that they are beset with. But people constantly forget that Russia is a master of soft power. And that's the first thing. The second thing is that people just don't know.
Yeah.
Look, Artem, I know you're going to dig into this a little bit later, so I'm not going to spoil, but I don't know why people are finding any of this shit coincidental that we're, it's Republican primary time and there's a border surge. And like most of these people are not even coming across the border. These are people that have literally been sent from Africa. And since we're looking at a screen on the screen right now of a Russian state-sponsored paramilitary group that is operating in Africa, I mean, be a little tin hat about it. Like, why not? We very clearly showed that Russia influenced the shit out of the 2016 election and the 2020 election because just the way that we eat garbage, and when I say garbage, I mean like mainstream media and consume information. It makes us very prone to being trigger happy and not diving into the depths of any issue.
Yeah.
Because if you look, more than skin deep at anything that's going on right now, it's very easy to see things like, oh, Mike Johnson had his campaign funded by 3 Russian oligarchs in 2018, and he got pinned for it and had to give all the money back. This is very straightforward, very easily Googleable stuff. This is shit that you could find out in, a Google search, a single Google search.
Yeah.
But
We call this headline knowledge. Somebody feels informed on a topic. Really, they just have headline knowledge. They don't actually have knowledge.
I mean, is that not it though? Like, I mean, you're in the States. You guys are in the West.
No, absolutely. Right. That's what I'm saying.
You guys
It's
just way better than I could.
yeah.
I watch it going on across the ocean. I just see people yelling at each other the whole time. The ability to have like a dialogue about anything is not preserved almost anywhere.
And also how the majority of people now, especially in the States, communicate. I get frustrated when I see people repeating these kinds of talking points on the internet. And then I try to be mature about it and be like, well, if this is not a Russian bot, if this is somebody who is parroting something that they believe in the moment, I don't know what they're going through. I don't know what kind of economic hardships they could be facing. I don't know what life experiences brought them to that conclusion, but it's important that these kinds of conversations happen that can look at nuance and then really try to give light to the actual situation. Because the thing that angers me the most is there's a lot of righteous anger, and I like righteous anger. But when these kinds of talking points get spouted by people who have righteous anger, they've already picked a target to spout it at. And that righteous anger could be used for so much better things than this. That's kind of my soapbox moment, I suppose. People have a right to be upset about their economic conditions, about the government. People have a right to want to voice their concerns. But when people are so easily manipulated because they don't have the time to read, they don't have the time to try to understand something that's on the other side of the world, and they don't have time to try to understand how it impacts them. But it's dangerous.
Yeah, but this isn't it your argument that you made about these spaghetti arguments about people have no time, and if you have doubts whether
the spaghetti argument
is a Russian bot?
I would say the spaghetti defense is not normal people doing it. The spaghetti defense is from people who know that they're putting out a bad argument in bad faith or multiple different arguments and just trying to get something to stick. I wouldn't say that people who are on the internet complaining about these things and calling the Ukraine war a proxy war is throwing out a spaghetti. I mean, it's a zombie argument, I guess you could call it. It's kind of what Ben had said earlier. They're just slurping up the spaghetti that's on the wall already. It's those who throw the spaghetti on the wall out there who are to blame.
I guess the thing that's surprising to me is that we live, at this point, there is nobody under the age of 60 that should not have an understanding of the fact that it's extremely easy to make shit up on the internet. And bearing that in mind, why does that not introduce a bit more of a filter, or like the grain of salt, mountain of salt, X quantity of salt, with which you view the world, because the news is the news. If you close your eyes or just don't read the news, your knowledge of this is zero, because none of this shit affects your life directly. So it's just pathetically easy to take the tiniest thing that influences your life, like, oh, milk costs 17% more than it did. And it's not, like, Miles, to your point, it's not in any way an unreasonable or an ill-founded or unjustified argument, right? Everybody's
lazy.
we're just trying to do our best. I
Yeah.
think most of us are legitimately out there trying to just go one day at a time and kind of make
Yeah.
our peace. Greater forces in the world that consistently try to screw us over. But
Not
it's-
everybody has the energy to not choose the path of least resistance. I'm angry. I'm told this is what I should be angry about. So there, it's done.
I mean, that's exhausting.
It is exhausting.
I know it's a very intelligent and manipulative system in play too. Like that's how ads work, and that's how targeted content works. Is that it has to make you mad, but
Sensationalized stuff for sure. Politically driven talking points for sure. Yeah.
yeah, it's like how meta. I mean, it's meta. The human negative response to anything is much more notable and much stronger than it is to a positive response, which is why negative feedback loops are, and I think just on Facebook and social media and Twitter or wherever else, are a real thing that people get stuck in. And that just echo chamber of noise and angry yelling, like you said, righteous anger, not unjustified, right?
Yeah. No, but I don't think it is.
How does that translate into Mike Johnson being Speaker of the House?
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing that I'm
misinformed. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I would write in like my dog before I would write in something like that. You know what I mean? I would just.
Yeah. Moving on.
Yeah, I think that was actually a really good chat we had.
So I think this is one of my last lines, but like, what would need to be in place for the Ukraine and Russian war to be a legit proxy? Now, I don't really like what I put here on the slide. I'm not going to lie, because I didn't come back and edit it yet. But I think, Artem, do you speak to this a little bit later?
No, I have I have two examples of ongoing proxy wars, like by definition. So with all these like instances involved that like actually fits the definition that we had like earlier in the slides.
Yeah. To wrap up my ideas is like there's no covert operations happening inside of Ukraine to try to set up a different government on part of NATO and the US. Yes, they want Ukraine to be part of NATO, but there's a very good reason why they want to be part of NATO, because of Russia. There's transparency for the most part that I can see when it comes on to reporting, and Zelensky coming out and saying certain things, the motives behind why he wants weapons for his country to defend itself. There is not a lot of transparency on the Russian side as far as, who are these other militants that are on the ground that are being employed. Is Wagner a state or non-state sponsored mercenary group, even though it's all with Russians inside of it?
How unexpected. What a turn of events.
Yeah.
How could anybody have known?
There.
So the Transnistria war, probably the first and the this is one war, the best example for the definition of a proxy war, because that was planned even like in Soviet Union time, so 1990s. The operation started being planned because like at the time when Gorbachev, who actually the same year 1990 received a Nobel Prize and made a deal with the government of the United States of America with their like for the help with the food, this chicken legs from the States when they went to Moscow because they had no food. With all that land size, they were not able to provide for themselves. So they started planning the war in Transnistria, and it was pretty much easy and like on land operation because only 14K volunteers and Russian forces participated in that, and they keep the territory by this day under their control. So the like main phase took like not much, like a few months. But the main point that you can see in like, so I'd say in many Russian proxy wars or like land operations, and the reason why they have it, like I'll skip for a while and we'll talk about that later. So the main pattern you can see here that they always in many cases start in industrial regions, like industrial regions with lots of Russian, and in case of Moldova, also Ukrainians being in power because of the plants and factories. So always industrial regions are this one is pointed correctly. Yeah, this one is Russia, but so far like technically proxy, and the parties that participated in that, unfortunately for me, has been Ukrainian. So Ukraine also helped Russians to get to Moldova. So we'll let them go through the territory, and we like let their trains with weapons to arrive to the region. So, and I would say that even Ukrainian, like one nationalist organization, participated on the same side with Russians.
Yeah, but there was like, I think to the point, credit here. This is the Soviet Union, so Russia did still have, in very much many ways, an iron grip over it. I think the Ukrainians were a very small majority of this, but so again, I appreciate. Oh, this is going to be a hell of an Ushanka coming down the line here, but for context too, this is Transnistria is, it is Moldova. Moldova is an EU nation. Do you remember when Moldova became an EU nation or no? I don't have that off the top of my head.
Well, in the Soviet Union, the country used to be an autonomous republic inside of Ukrainian Soviet Republic. So some sort of Crimea right now, like in Ukraine.
Okay.
Right. And when like that was the time, Moldova just declared their like its independence, and now we recognize the country as an independent state.
But this is so that everybody's aware of this little area that's
little area. Yeah, it's what is that? Southwest of Ukraine and of Moldova, and the red one. This is Transnistria, and it lays on the left bank of the Dniester River,
which is but this is actually, fun fact, this is a very common route for Russian missiles coming out of the Black Sea and going up into Ukrainian regions like Vinnytsia, and because the Russians can obviously fire missiles over their own territory, so that's a very unfortunately common thing. I mean, I forget how big the size of like the military contingent is that they still have there.
It started with 14K, and now it's, I don't know, I cannot say for sure, but this is not much. This is not many, like maybe up to 2, maybe 3K, like military like forces in there. So not that much, but Moldova doesn't fight like with them right now.
There's one other point that if I can add real quick, that this was a let's just assume that this is Moldova. This not assuming this is Moldova, but there was, and Martin, please correct me if I'm wrong, a large contingent of Russian-speaking people that were planted there artificially during the Soviet Union, which is another very common Soviet move. So after the Soviet Union actually fell and these ethnic groups came together and started saying that, we want to be our own country because we are our own people. We're not Russian, we're not Soviet, we are Moldovans. The Russians were able to jump in and say, oh, but you have a shit ton of Russian speakers there. We need to protect our interests. And then, now we have 34 years later, we still have a nation that I think only Russia recognizes. No one acknowledges that Transnistria exists.
Maybe other Russian proxies in other regions.
It has no actual viable avenues of diplomacy. It's just a Russian satellite. between Moldova and Ukraine.
Yeah, but this is very common, very common pattern of Russian reasons when they have like Russian speaking majority or minority, or they play on the religion. So these Orthodox groups that they need to protect them. So this is just a reason that they used since like 1990s. So that wasn't even an invention. Like the reasons for invasion of Ukraine wasn't like made up by Putin or like in modern Russian Federation. That was like set back in the Soviet Union, and they did not the same, but like relatively close thing to Georgia, even though the reasons, official reasons of the conflict were completely different, but the outcome and the arguments were relatively close. And by this day, like the Moldova is it's a small country, and if you take a look at the big map, so you'll see the quite noticeable number of conflicts around Russia, but they're not against any particular country. They are just fluctuation, like spikes in the regions very close to Russia, but they always cripple the economy and the development of the countries where they are going on.
Yes, I'm holding off because I also have many things to say about this, but I don't want to steal your thunder because I'm already accidentally stolen quite a bit of Miles's thunder. Sorry. Babe.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
No. This is
I don't think you stole any thunder. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm like revving in third gear with the parking brake on here, so we can keep moving.
Yeah,
Next slide.
yeah, next one, please.
Oh God, it stays.
Oh, guys, this is beautiful. This is beautiful. This is the material for a nice poster. Why would you do that? Okay, we're looking at another post-Soviet republic, the Republic of Georgia. So now it's independent state, and everyone recognizes it. And we will not talk about the conflict or Russian invasion in 2008, because it started way before, and that was just like maybe that's a topic for another episode. But this time we need to understand that the conflict that was planned here in like way earlier than even 1992. It was planned like probably in 30s during the Stalin like rule of the Soviet Union. Now we can see or witness the outcome of what happens to countries in which big or other let's say powerful players on our planet do not participate enough.
Yes,
because now despite all the progress, despite all the reforms that were made after 2003, now the country has a pro-Russian government that helps to avoid sanctions, and the conflict was started as an ethnic conflict, and actually this time Ukrainians didn't participate on the Russian side.
no.
This time Ukrainians participated on Georgian side.
Yeah. So
not official military force, of course, like volunteers.
So, Artem, just to clarify here, are you trying to imply that Russia will use soft and military power and any kind of dirty, underhanded, cheating method it could possibly do in order to expand its influence by absorbing smaller, weaker ethnic groups and nations in order to get access to warm water ports? Is this the point that you're
Yes and no, because Russia cripples the economy of countries, and of course the economy is, lays on the abilities of trade of the country, right? So the Russia would always takes control of the ports. They say it didn't happen with Moldova because Moldova has no access to a seaside, but Moldova had Moldova's industrial territory was on the left bank of the river. So Russians took control of that left bank of the river. And it's also not something new, because North Korea during the war also was the part of the peninsula with the industrial area. right? So they crippled the country's economy, and like then they used the soft power just in propaganda and like the trade wars just to place in power pro-Russian government. It's always the same. Ukraine also went through something similar after the first Ukrainian revolution, which technically was like literally was a protest because Ukraine didn't change, nothing was so all revolutions in Ukraine were about the results of elections. So they were just more like civil protests.
Some, I guess, historical add in here. Let it also be noted for the record that as soon as Ukraine self-determined its own path into Europe as opposed to, backwards into Russia, you might notice that at that time, that's when Russia started actively stealing territory.
Yes,
So-
and they're still walking like through the Georgian territory.
It's again the indigenous response of a sovereign nation and a sovereign people expressing their own will, and Russia saying, that doesn't work for us.
Yes, that's what happens. Like, and it happens like all the time. And speaking of the previous like an indigenous response, so the indigenous response in Moldova, like for the previous country, right, was relying on sometimes some volunteers from Romania, because the next country, which was not like a post-Soviet Union or former Soviet Union country, was Romania, Moldova. And very famous Russian politician used that argument that Moldova is taken by Romanian nationalists. And there's a video about that with that interview of him. That keeps and those nationalists would like to keep like Moldova and their and its people from their real intention to be allied with Russia.
Yeah, and for people that may be confused, I think, by the notion of, oh, why doesn't Moldova just take back that little, strip of land?
Yes,
Moldova is, I think, the second poorest country in Europe.
maybe sometimes it depends how you count it, because like sometimes I hear the same about Ukraine when people count like the
But
GDP per capita.
GDP, my least favorite thing.
But point being that, we see, even 14,000 Russian soldiers just in a base, as it's not. I don't know. I think that's the other thing too. Like Miles, you could maybe speak to slightly more, but people assume that war is easy and taking back land is easy, and it's really not. Right? Ukraine is currently fighting to take back land that Russia had, 9 months to sit on, and it's extremely difficult.
Yeah, and they're dug in, and there's minefields.
Yeah.
And it's just,
It's all mined to hell, right? There's more. It'll take, I think, hundreds of years to demine Ukraine.
Yeah, the most mined territory in history of mining, I think. There's more mines in Ukraine than there has ever been in any other war area.
But it's not like Moldova can just kind of like walk across the river and kindly say like, "Hey, you 14,000, can you just like fuck off?"
Yeah, it's a very dug in occupation.
Yeah, and it's dug in militarily, it's dug in culturally too, because that's again the soft power game. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so sorry, Art.
No, that's that is how things work. I mean, it's gonna be like, I don't know, like waste, like empty land if we deoccupy it, after we deoccupy it. If it's like, I'm not sure like that how much time it would take. I just don't see it like what can be done in that matter. Because if it's in Russia, it's not something like happens overnight. It's also like logistics, supply. It's all like infrastructure. So the war is infrastructure, and how fast we can establish it. So I'm not sure that it will happen during the next decade.
Russia,
Sure.
well, because they already ruined Crimea. The Russians already turned Crimea back into just a hole in the ground, right? So
They needed Crimea for being a military base, and they got it for being a military base.
Yes,
They don't care about Crimea. They care about logistics.
Yeah, they care about Sevastopol. Right. I get that. But my point being that like Russia just it's very imperialistic in the sense that they suck up everything and just bleed the land. Wherever they take, they bleed it dry. You know, Donetsk is probably a shell at this point. You look at the footage of things like Bakhmut, right? You look at the footage of things like Avdiivka. Like the Russians have no qualms about destroying swaths of land that they, want to stick a Russian flag on because it's, to your point, Artem, it's all about the larger goals. It has nothing to do with the actual people. So the
Yeah,
narrative,
sometimes it's larger goals or just for joy.
Yeah.
Because there is no normal reason, normal explanation that you can imply on the situation. Why do you need it? It's not territory. They don't need territory. They have more than enough on one hand.
yes.
But somehow they have sentiment about Ukraine for the moment.
Moving on.
Yeah, let's move on. Oh,
Memes. So I guess to globally wrap up, or not wrap up, but to condense the talking points into a single slide. There is the Russian proxy war narrative and the Ukrainian proxy war narrative are nothing but a single piece of the Kremlin disinformation campaigns and the false Kremlin narratives. And again, these are not deep narratives. It does not take a lot of thinking to disprove this. You do not have to apply a lot of effort to come to the conclusion that this is clearly wrong, as evidenced by the meme in the top right. You can't call what happened the Euromaidan. You can't call that a civil war. People that call it a civil war do nothing but, like Miles said, dehumanize locals. And since I'm kind of wrapping up, guys, you guys want to chime in at any point, let me know. But if we're talking about proxy wars here, I found the MAGA meme with the Teletubby. That's just awesome. I want that in like a coffee mug. Because the other side of this is if you are, even if you're indifferent to Ukraine, right? Even if you don't give a shit, that means you're okay with the notion that Russia and all of its buddies wins. And who are Russia's buddies? Russia's buddies are Iran. Iran is Hezbollah. Russia's buddies are North Korea. North Korea is North Korea. That speaks for itself. Russia's other buddies are Belarus, which is a dictatorship or authoritative dictatorship. Russia's buddies are Serbia, which is a Russian pocket left over after all the Bosnia Sarajevo stuff in the early 90s, in which there was a conflict where, again, NATO was bombing European country, and Russian intelligence services played a very large hand into a lot of the shit that was going on. All you those MAGA Republicans, they're in the same team. I don't know how else to say it. I don't like to be absolutist about things. I don't like to be black and white about things. But if you are actively hindering Ukraine's efforts to support itself, I consider you to be a traitor. And we don't have, but wouldn't mind. And I'm going to keep it at that because I don't want to have to bleed myself out of the podcast afterwards. So I have another meme here that also reflects the narrative of American imperialism. Yet another argument, very, very commonly cited. It's another noodle in the spaghetti argument. So you want a full list of all the places where the Soviet Union which again, the Soviet Union, for people that understand, that people that don't understand, the Soviet Union was basically very exceedingly Moscow-centric. So all the stuff we're talking about here, the forced implantation of Russian-speaking people into non-Russian-speaking areas, the forced deportation of local populations to Siberia, or just killing them through famine, through gulags, through cultural suppression, through language suppression, right? So this is how Moscow's influence spread throughout Europe and the world through most of the 20th century. This is how we got things like the Red Scare. This is a thing that exists, and they're still using the same playbook. That's the other thing. People are forgetting this. I have no idea why people are forgetting this. Why people are forgetting this. because it's you're reading the same story twice in Chechnya, once in Abkhazia, once with Georgia, and again another time, right? Twice now in Ukraine. Look at what Russia's done with Belarus. In the meantime, all they have to do is say, why did American imperialism do this? Why did NATO do this? And you have idiots like Jordan Peterson.
I still don't understand the definition of American imperialism.
It's it doesn't. I don't either. I mean, what could you say? I can understand the argument back in the 50s when it was legitimately a Cold War thing, and we're like deposing. The CIA is deposing leaders of sovereign nations. I get that. We don't really, we don't do that shit anymore.
After like Vietnam and Korea.
Well, I mean, you could argue Saddam Hussein. I guess that's a conversation you could at least have, but he was also, a pretty shitty guy all around. In the meantime, look at the other side of that too. Is even if you don't like the American imperialism argument, or if you feel that America is shitty, that's just whataboutism, which is weak. Whataboutism does not detract from the sins of Russia in any way. It's the first thing. And second thing, look at who Russia hangs out with. Russia supports Assad in Syria, who chemically weapons his own people. Russia gets direct support from Iran, which is Hezbollah. It is Hezbollah. Like, it's just the threads you can pull on them. They are many and they are there. So let's next slide, please. So at worst, you get the Mike Johnsons, who I think are traitors to the American people. I think there's nothing honest about anything he's trying to do. He's clearly incompetent. Thank God. If his entire impeachment and his voting processes can be ruined by one Democrat showing up from the hospital in a wheelchair, right? These are the things that he'll be remembered for. But at worst, he's a traitor. At best, he's a useful idiot. I mean, Tucker Carlson, Jesus Christ. The point being, these are not new talking points. If you look at the talking points on the slide, and for those listening, it's things like Russia is actually, trying to restore peace. It's things like, Russia has to ensure the security of the local region or protect the interest of Russian speakers. It's things like target country A is aggressive. Chechnya is aggressive. Ukraine is aggressive. Moldova is aggressive. Romania is aggressive. The classic NATO or the West is shaking the jar, or whatever. Turn the proxy war argument that we've been discussing here. This is a study that we'll put in the description, but this is people sat down and just did what I did coming out of college, doing data entry with Russian, and they found thousands of articles that just endlessly echo these talking points. This is the spaghetti. You're looking at the recipe right here of these very fundamental, very commonly repeated arguments. And none of these are valid in any way. Like, these are all immediately. How long? I mean, what's the long? You can't reasonably support any of these. I mean, guys, chime in. Like, let me know which of these has a modicum of leg to stand on. Ukraine is a puppet of the West. No. Russia is seeking peace. Russia never seeks peace.
Yeah, Russia, the definition of Russian peace is not quite the same idea of peace that we have.
No, it's Bucha. That is Russian peace.
Yeah.
It's Grozny twice. It's mass rape and murder and brutality and.
Yeah. I like Russia has a moral obligation to do something about security in the region. What was the Minsk agreements? Was that what it was?
The first one or the second one?
Whichever one was the deciding one where Ukraine happily gave up their nuclear arsenal and so they could get peace secured by the US, NATO, and Russia. I think it was NATO.
Okay, that's Budapest memorandum.
No, I'm sorry. The Budapest. I apologize. Not the Minsk. I don't know why.
1994.
Yeah, the Budapest memorandum.
Yeah. If you spend any amount of time watching, if the moral obligation one's an interesting one, Miles, actually, you bring it up because it's very easy to false flag this shit.
Mm-hmm.
And Russia does that with its own people extensively. Mm-hmm. So, you look at Artem, please correct me if I'm wrong. Was it Litvinenko that wrote the book?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Former FSB agent who moved to the United Kingdom and was assassinated and poisoned by Russian, like some Russian intelligence service.
Correct. And this is a FSB KGB spy, 20 years on the job, gets out, writes a book about how Russia how Russia actually used the moral obligation argument after bombing several hundred of its own citizens to death in Dagestan, which we can superimpose the map in the previous slide, but that's another Georgian Caucasus Chechnya-ish territory. So more obligation about something security in the region. The story looked like this. Number one, Russians are imported into Dagestan, which is a Muslim-speaking Caucasian. What's the demonym, Miles, for someone from the Caucasus?
Did you say the Denemin?
What do you call someone from that region? Like America's American, French is French. Someone from the Caucasus region.
Caucasians?
Is that what it is?
If you're Caucasian, you're from the Caucasus. Or are you talking about like the
northern?
Yeah, wait, I think I know where. Wait, it's coming to me. It's the. Oh my God, what the hell? This might not even be right. Let me just do a quick search.
I'm going to insert a
Schengen region. Is that what you're talking about?
I don't think so. But anyway.
No, guys. No. We're talking about like. So I understand the confusion about calling someone like Caucasian. Like because it's not what English like speaking mind would most think of. But I believe for the moment that it's the right adjective.
Caucasian.
Right. Artem, you are the smartest of us, so I'm going to trust you blindly.
I need to go back. I'm really confused where the word Caucasian came up in this argument to begin with.
Okay, let's check it.
I'm speaking about the fact that Russia wanted to expand its interests in Chechnya. And so what it did was it took a bunch of people in the areas surrounding Chechnya, right? Because Soviet Union fell, ethnic groups are trying to be their own thing for the first time in a long time, get out from under Moscow's heel.
Caucasian.
Absorbed. Russia takes an apartment building in Dagestan that has 450 some people living. Well, it has a bunch of people living in it, but they bomb it. 450 Russians die. Local police apprehend FSB agents from Moscow that are then immediately released by a special phone call. Russian news and Vladimir Putin go live saying that we need to invade immediately and establish security in the region.
Okay.
So false flag operations. They're very much a thing. Anybody that remembers from the Euromaidan, second one, what the Americans know about, is that a lot of the riots that Russia wants to show on TV are involved titushki, which are basically thugs hired by the Russians to create violent riots and start fights and hit policemen and things like that. So, Russia's very good at this. This is the soft power I was talking about. Can we do the next slide?
Yeah.
Thanks. So I like, Miles, the fact that we're agreeing here. It's kind of interesting how we're focusing. We have different focuses on slightly different aspects of the definition because you're talking about the covert operations, which is kind of cool. I didn't think of that at all. I just wanted to echo the point that the Ukraine cannot be a proxy war because the primary interests of the conflict are, in this case, not determined or defined by external parties, right?
Yes, correct.
Ukraine is obviously interested in not being absorbed by Russia and being its own country. Russia obviously wants to absorb Ukraine. This is evident by the fact that Russia tried to take over Kiev and depose the president of a sovereign nation. So, again, the counter question of if this is a proxy war, this somehow is a massive elaborate scheme, then who is controlling Putin? Just curious.
Obviously, China.
I mean, you can point the finger at China all you want.
That's
I
what
don't-
somebody said in one of the comments. That's how they defined it.
That,
I think
that's too simplified.
it, Russia's been doing this exact same thing for 30 years. I don't think Russia has been doing this for 30 years because China's been telling it to do this for 30 years.
Exactly.
Russia's been doing this for much more than 30 years, actually. Russia's been doing this. The Russia Holodomor the Ukrainians before China was a thing. So not buying it.
Yeah.
This is very much a symptom of the same disease, and the disease is Russia. So, the support by Western nations, it, again, does not extend. I mean, there are obvious benefits, right?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, the motivation between the U.S. and NATO to support Ukraine and give them weapons and training is ultimately our own security. Like Russia, the Kremlin has spoken many different times about how, like, well, we're not going to stop at Ukraine. Estonia is right now sounding the alarms. I think it was the British and then a German top general saying we need to prepare for war because Russia's probably not going to stop. But that doesn't fall under proxy definitions because we're not trying to destabilize Russia. We're trying to secure our own borders. Like, it's not something that we're going in covertly about in trying to dismantle the Kremlin.
Yeah. I mean, are there tons of benefits? Yes.
Well, absolutely.
Russia is a happier world. I think the Patriot missile system gets to train on Dagger missiles. So the Russian fleet gets destroyed. So there's obviously geopolitical interests in play.
Yes.
They're all secondary to the thesis statement of Ukraine is a sovereign nation and has the right to exist.
And has the right to defend themselves.
Have the right to defend themselves. Thank you. That's an excellent touch point, which is why, despite that thesis statement, you do not find any actual Western state actors in play. If you're trying to think of non-state actors on the Ukrainian side, apart from the aforementioned volunteer battalions, still hard for me to come up with really anything, right? If anybody is using proxy elements in the conflict, it's Russia. Because Russia has, again, no issues with taking a bunch of young men from Buryatia, very poor region, a bunch of very poor young dudes from Chechnya, and just throwing them into the grinder. When that wasn't working out, Russia took Wagner, which is just a bunch of convicts. So it's not, again, under the flag of the Russian army, even though it's supported by the Russian army. So we can have a talk about whether or not it's a proxy element or what. But the point being that Russia is, doing everything it can to keep the white Moscow boys and the sons of St. Petersburg safe. And it's just that I don't know. Russia's obviously doing covert shit, but that does not make this a NATO-Russia war. So the Pentagon tweets about, reports on Ukraine. So there's not like any kind of attempted cover-ups going on here. And interesting point. Does anybody remember the 40,000 Syrians that Assad promised Putin?
No.
No. No.
Yeah. Where are those guys at if this is a proxy war? Where's the hordes of American Navy SEALs? Where's the SAS troopers? It's not. There's not the null hypothesis, but the opposite is. You can't. I can't even start to come close to justifying the opposite. In terms of this, it could be a proxy war, and giving supplies and weapons to a country does not. Again, I think it's just not a good definition.
If we could have talk about this, or if we can talk about this as a proxy war, probably it wouldn't be a big problem not for Russian propaganda, but for any open-minded journalist to point a piece of the front line in Ukraine where proxy war elements sent from the West participating in the battles, because that's quite difficult to find. The element of proxy war, there will be some troops or volunteers sent by the Western governments, and you cannot find them. There is none of them exists like on the front line.
Yeah.
Some volunteers that came voluntarily to Ukraine, but it's such a small fraction of them that they are what of mentioned on the like only in the news, but they don't make a big difference.
Yeah, it's such a negligibly small. I mean, I see him on Twitter every once in a while, but this is nothing compared to like the million. What was the casualty count for Russia now with the wounded in action and KIAs?
Wounded or lost?
No, I mean casualties. So I'm including dead and wounded. What's the Russian number at right now?
It's over 300K. I just lost it.
Yeah. This is the volunteer battalions fighting for Ukraine are not even a percentage of that.
Yes,
It's going to be small.
Yeah.
So it's
And to journalists' credit on this and government's credit is it seems that whenever aid is sent in whether any kind of form, military aid, training, humanitarian, it's transparent. Russia has not been transparent about where they're getting their things from. It's always we found out because of monitoring. Anytime you go on the news or you scan a feed, you can see like, Denmark is giving now all of their artillery to the front. It's transparent. It's not. No one's claiming we're not part of this and then helping. Covertly. Russia does that all the time.
Yeah, whereas the Ukrainians are shooting missiles out of the sky and then picking up the pieces and saying that it's like North Korean written on it. So
finding Starlink and saying that it's been purchased through Russia or through, was it Syria? Yeah.
Like there's this
is that weird dude.
Elon Musk needs to go away. I think he's first. I don't know. Let's get a Neuralink up in his head and then just turn him into one of those like Inception people that he's just exists in the dream state. Like,
I think he already exists in a dream state.
it's a valid argument to make. Like I just also. You brought up. Thank you, Miles.
I'm here for you.
I would kiss you.
You'll get a chance to.
In the way that only I can. Because who's not? Wait, what's the next slide, Miles? Can you just like preview this for me? Give me like who's not talking about this? At least as of this recording. The champion of free speech himself, the king of X. I have heard nothing from him regarding the alleged death of Alexei Navalny, whereas Tucker Carlson, useful idiot / Kremlin asset, has gone on after recording a video of himself being shocked by the fact that Moscow has a subway. And Tucker Carlson's very happy to say shit like, leaders have to kill people. Like, what? So, but Elon Musk has been very quiet about this because Navalny's apparently dead. So if you really want if you really want Miles, go back to the tin hat, I guess, argument, the text box in the bottom is a comment that I found, which is, saying that the courageous and brave Navalny is dead. He was killed by Putin, killed him. The the end result of the death of Navalny should invigorate the Congress of the United States to give more money to Ukraine. And in terms of Navalny's death, look for the person who benefits from it, and you'll find the person that arranged it. So this is a confirmed, U.S. government snuck into a Russian prison and force-fed Navalny a gallon of bleach. I don't know what more proof you need, but I don't know why the world's super upset about this guy being dead. He's it's a fight between two people that I don't want either of them to win. You know what I mean? Either way, it's bad. Alexei Navalny was a massive racist. He was very anti-Ukraine, very much pro-imperialist Russia. So does his death imply that Russia's going to, confirm that Russia's going nowhere on the fast train? Probably. The thing that I'm waiting for is the Western leader response to this, because I know that Brittanica Joe has promised a devastating consequences. Miles, was that the term? Do you know the quote?
Not offhand. I don't.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
I think
was
I said
promised
this earlier,
how many
right?
months ago?
No.
So, like, in fact, we know two of them, two instances of Navalny. So the one that in which the West believes, ultimately believes, as like in the future where Russia can be a democracy somehow. So there is no evidence of that, but still many people believes it. And we know that Alexei Navalny, who was supporting the Russian invasion to Georgia, who was participating in all these like Nazi demonstrations in Russia, even though from the last months of his life in prison, he was supporting the Western course of Western way of helping Ukraine in the war. So we know really little about real Navalny, but we know for sure that he had a chance not to go back to Russia and sit somewhere in Europe and teach the entire world how democracy should work. So and even such a small, I would say, impact of him on the entire Russia, because he was popular as a opposition leader or politician, but his impact was almost nothing to the political life in Russia.
Yeah, I mean, despite the fact that they literally they poisoned his water bottle or the inside seam of his underpants, or was it both?
That's all news to me. I would have read up on this one.
And that was the last time that they got him out, because he collapsed on a plane. And I think it's because
yeah. Is that when he was with his wife?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's his wife.
The blonde chick's his wife, yeah. I guess wrapping it all up. We don't have a wrap-up slide, but
I would like to nominate myself for the best drawn zoom hair facial thing ever. That's how I'm gonna wrap this up.
I would like to second that, because you've given Navalny the customary prison tier tat.
Yeah, I feel like it's appropriate.
Which is in probably the beard that he grew.
Died flu.
Well,
So
the bleach being force-fed to him by Kamala Harris.
Oh yeah. She's suspended from the ceiling, like Mission Impossible. So is the Ukrainian-Russian war a proxy war?
I cannot find an iota of a reasonable argument that would actually support that claim.
Yeah. Unless we're talking about Russia.
I mean, straight zero. Right.
So I don't know, kind of, but not really.
I mean,
the
main points we hit on were the determinant, the strategic interests, right? So who has the big say in this? And in this case, Ukraine has the primary say in terms of their own strategic interests, and Russia has the primary say in their own strategic interests, as opposed to China proxying Russia and as opposed to NATO proxying Ukraine. Because if you remove everybody else, Russia is still invading Ukraine. No clandestine methods being employed by the West. The West is very clearly saying, you get our intelligence, you get some of our guns and some of our money, but you have Russian traitors infiltrating our governments to great effect, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And this is the same playbook that Russia's used and Moscow has used literally dozens of times. So I am in no state to even start entertaining the argument that this is a proxy war, because I'm not a useful idiot.
Spaghetti.
Yeah, I'm not sucking on the wall. That's the takeaway from the podcast: is don't suck on the wall.
because they're not snozzberries.
They're not snozzberries.